Um, good evening, willkommen et bienvenue to this evening's virtual Power Platform virtual happy hour with our wonderful guests this evening, ably assisted by my wonderful assistants, Chris Huntingford and Carl Cookson. And Lee sends his apologies, but he's doing other things this evening. So
Apparently
he's getting vaccinated, so you can't moan at him.
Oh, come on.
Man, come on. Where's the dedication?
You could dial in from there.
Yeah, exactly. So I could have come in on his phone or something, but no. Good old vaccination. And this evening I'm very excited that we are chatting all things community with the wonderful Charles Sterling and the incomparable Sir Andrew of Bibby. And we just to kick off, perhaps you guys would like to give us a quick intro about yourselves and your community credentials. If I could start with you, Charles, that'd be awesome.
Charles Sterling, I've actually been working at Microsoft going on for 30 years. Most of that time, actually, initially, that time was in the support space. So if you've ever called in and asked, hey, how come Excel isn't printing? You may have spoken with me back in the day. And the remainder of the time, or until recently, it's actually been the developer division. So if you've actually used the .NET Framework or Visual Studio, I may have worked on some of the features you've used. And now I am working on Power Platform. So you probably actually interacted with me in the Power BI space. Yay for me. And now on Power Apps. I was temporarily also owning Power Virtual Agents. And yeah, I would say that I'm pretty well versed across the Power Platform, and that's where I'm at now. Allison, thank you for having me.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And Andy Bibby, tell us a bit about what's your name and where'd you come from?
Love it. Hello, my name's Andrew Bibby. I'm from the UK. I live in the Midlands of the UK, I suppose, South Midlands. Thank you for having me, by the way. I'm involved in community in the UK largely through the user group. So I've been helping to run the Dynamics 365 CRM, I don't even know what we want to call it these days, but CRM user group for about 7 years. I can't actually remember exactly when I started doing it, but yeah, I'll probably explain that in a bit. But yeah, that's really where I'm involved in community. Get to meet lots of lovely people, some of which are on the call. But yes, any questions, please fire ahead about how you can get involved. Anything about user groups, certainly I can maybe help with. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming. It's wonderful to have you both here. And I think probably a really apt place to start the conversation is if we were to define community. What is community? What does it mean? Who'd like to handle that political hot potato first?
Well, I think Charles has got quite a good definition that I agree with, so I'll let Charles go.
You know, mine's pretty coarse-grained. And the reason I actually like defining things is because I like to measure how they're going. And if you can't define it, it's hard to actually figure out if they're on track. So my definition was a gathering of like-minded individuals, just that simple. And I think Carl Cookson just nodded his head and yes, so maybe that works out. Yeah. And if we overcomplicate it or over-index into it, then we start leaving people out. So that's why I actually leave it very, very coarse-grained. So anyways, that's my, again, very coarse-grained definition of community.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. And I was thinking a bit about this. And, you know, initially for me, it's user groups and it's getting people together in a place to talk about and geek out about the thing that we love. CRM back in the old days and now Dynamics 365. But also it's wider than that as well, because there's parts of community I don't really get involved with, like the Dynamics forums. There's a huge community there. Virtual meetings like this, you know, obviously that's much more popular these days. But a gathering doesn't have to be physical. It can be, you know, virtual across the world, which I love.
Very cool. I mean, anything that you would add to that, Chris, or?
Yeah, so I kind of feel like I'm with Chuck on this one, where I don't necessarily agree that it's like-minded individuals every time. because I think sometimes it could be very different people, but potentially striving for a similar purpose. So let me give you an example. Like, so Nige, good old Nige and I are definitely not in agreement on a lot of things, and we're definitely not like-minded, but we have a similar
Right.
purpose. Yeah. So I kind of
Got
feel
a common
like,
passion.
Yeah, passion. Yeah, certainly.
I
Yeah,
definitely
I
think
agree with that.
I think as long as there's something that you believe in and want to input into, like you can create a community out of anything. And I actually remember Chuck, ages ago, man. I reckon it was probably about a year and a half ago. I was talking. I had some like banter on Twitter with somebody about internal and external communities and different ways to set them up and why you set them up. And it's quite interesting because you said something that made me think really carefully, and that was like, "Can you explain the difference to me?" And I was like, "Actually, I can." And then I had to think about it. And I'm like, "Wait, I don't know if I can." So yeah, it was quite scary. But like, I've actually got a question for both of you guys, right? When you start looking at like community evolution, right? So what communities are cool, like lots of people are cool. Why join a community? Like, what is the core goal of being part of a community? Any takers?
Yeah, like this is something I've thought about a lot. And actually, we've got a user group coming up in September. And over the past kind of 18 months, this was going to be a theme of like an introduction really to the user group. Welcome to the day, and like, why are you here? Why get involved? You know, and I think it's different for everybody, but for me, and this is quite a complex question for me, but this is why I have to think about it a lot. But for me, it's given me so much. You know, this community, it's such a nebulous thing to call it. What we're involved with is community, but I find the more you put in, the more you invest in it, the more you get out of it. And I've met all of you wonderful people on the call, lots of other people in real life and virtually as well. And that has, apart from anything, personally for me, that has given me this massive group of friends around the world, which has been hugely rewarding. And it is a really valuable part of my life. And I don't expect everybody to get that. I don't know if it's you know, you can't sort of come into the community I like and think, yeah, this is a way to make new friends. You probably will make new friends, but that's not the end goal. It's kind of sharing information, talking with other like-minded people about that passion that you mentioned, Nick, Carl, like just geeking out about stuff that we're really interested in, even if we have differences of opinion on certain areas. But the more you put in, like the more you invest, the more you get involved with visiting user groups or forums, you know, get involved in helping out in whatever degree, you know, all the way from just, I don't know, doing a talk or just going along and meeting people on the day to actually helping to organize a user group and then maybe leading a user group. I really find that the more time you invest, actually, the more reward you get back from it. And actually, Sarah Critchley and I used to have this just like collective sigh at the end of the day. So Sarah used to help run the UK user group, and she moved to Canada, and I took over. And we would message each other on the train on the way home after we've had a user group day, and just be like, "Oh, that was so cool! You know, everything went well. We met loads of great people. We had loads of great sessions, and it's just this lovely kind of sigh of, oh, God, what a great thing we're involved in, really." And that's why I do it. That's what kept me involved.
Like a collective satisfaction.
Absolutely. Sharing knowledge, apart from anything else, but meeting lots of people and connecting people. I love doing that.
Charles?
Yeah, so actually, I don't know if folks on the call have actually looked at the community commitment curve, but I think people in general, and Chris, I actually love your amendment to my definition, where they may not be like-minded, they may not actually be in agreement, but they still have that common drive that brings them together. And I like the word passion. That certainly works out. So after 15 years, I am going to amend my definition based on your input. Thank you for that. But I think people in general, especially us, there is a passion for doing better or actually making ourselves better. And that is actually kind of what the community commitment curve is actually trying to quantify. It actually goes out and tries calculating it. And it says, if you're here, your interaction is going to be around there you go. Thank you, Carl. Bringing in the data. It's all about you. And then as you actually walk up a little bit, it's like, maybe I actually feel good enough about myself to answer questions. And then if you go a little bit further up, it's like, I think I can actually probably go out and just help people. I can go out and maybe present. And as Andrew was saying, each of that step, you actually reap a different set of rewards back. And it's actually kind of cool that when you get up to the top, you get these cadre of friends that are on this call that you may not get at the bottom. So also, as you go up, while the investment go up, the perks and the benefits actually are commiserate back into actually being up near the top. So anyways, I just thought it was interesting.
I think that's super interesting. I wasn't actually aware of that until we spoke about the curve, until we spoke about it the other day. And what community meant for me, and I don't know, like I could only speak to myself and my own experience, but I was the only person in my company working on CRM, because Power Platform wasn't a thing then. And so for me, it was the only place I could go to get knowledge and to get help and to get support and assistance on stuff, or to, get ideas on how to do things better. Like, to go, I'm trying to do this and it's not working out, and somebody else go, oh, don't do it that way. You're going at it completely the wrong way. And that was like was like a leapfrog from really basic knowledge that you would do on Docs and Learn type stuff, just knowing where everything is, to actually being able to manipulate things or get to like really good solutions. And in line with that curve, as I got to know more people in the community and more people helped me and I knew more, then I was able to help more people with my knowledge. And then I kind of made like a little challenge for myself to be a person that anybody could come to. So for me, I would like to put myself out there and say, I might not know the answer. I probably don't know the answer to your question, but I almost certainly know somebody that does. So just ask me, I'll find somebody that will help you. Because just knowing who to go to, I think, is a massive step, and it's a massive door opener to get people involved in community.
Yeah, 100%. I think like I'm going to talk a lot about user groups, but this applies to wider community as well. But that's absolutely something that when I started going to user groups, I kind of gave myself that challenge of meeting new people and also introducing new people. It's exactly what you said, Alison. And the more people the more, and this is my favorite part, I think, of the user group days that we have, is somebody coming up and asking a question about something. I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm not the right person to help you, but I know this guy over here or this girl over here. Let me introduce you and let me, let's have you chat, and then you can share knowledge together, which, I love that part of the day. And I really miss that part of sort of virtual sessions, really, because it's harder to do virtually, but not impossible.
Yeah, totally. Charles, you've got your hand up.
Oh, I forgot to take it back down. It was
now you have to speak. That's the law. No, I'm just
yeah, our value actually goes from being an IC at some point and looking at that community commitment curve. You're at that engaging level is where you as an IC or a subject matter expert starts transcending into your network that Andrew was talking about is almost equally as valuable. So it's interesting is that, somewhere down in onboarding and engaging, it's all about I speak with the voice of authority. And then all of a sudden at some point it becomes we speak from a voice of authority here. Actually, let me bring you into my tribe.
And that was a great thing. That was the thing I enjoyed the most, was that feeling of like people welcoming me in. It was like being part of the blob, right? but in a nice, less horror filmy kind of way. It's kind of like, and as we grew, and we just took on a much bigger mass, and then like it was much easier to bring people in and say, oh look, because if you're a first timer or you don't know anybody, it can be a hugely intimidating environment. And everybody knows I'm a gobshite and I'll go up to anybody and talk to them, and I don't really care. That's just who I am. But I know not everybody's like that, and the amount of times Carl is a great example.
Lots of people.
Yeah, like loads of people just don't want to do that networking thing or going. So, one of the things that I really miss about the in-person things is you could always spot at a tea or coffee break or at lunch break somebody who's on their own and doesn't know anybody, and go up and strike up a conversation and say, oh, what are you looking, and you just start introducing them to people, and then you see them become part of the community.
That's what I love, and that's like a challenge. And I think Sarah introduced this when she was leading user groups, is if you come to a user group, no matter how big it is or small it is, if you're feeling concerned or you're feeling kind of like, I don't want to go and talk to anybody else. And I was that person once upon a time. I wasn't running my mouth on calls like this, very introverted and very kind of, just wanting to keep myself to myself. But you sort of push through that barrier. But the first step really is go to user group meeting, and whether it's virtual or in person, talk to one person that you don't know. And then the next time you come, talk to two people, and you see how it goes. And the more you go, actually, the more times you'll go, I spoke to that person last time, I'm going to go say hello. And it's less of a barrier to kind of entry and getting involved. And that starts the involvement. Before you know it, I was that person 6-7 years ago. Obviously, maybe it would go faster for you, but you'd be leading a user group, you could take over from me. So yeah, it's difficult, I think, particularly in our industry. We do have a lot of people that are, maybe happy interacting online and things like that, but in person is a bit more difficult. But that's the challenge. That's like a personal challenge, and that's also what I get out of the user groups. It's a personal challenge for me to kind of get me out of my comfort zone of the people that I know, the things that I do, stand up in front of people and talk, which I never thought I would do. And it helps me grow, and that's why I love in the chat there's lots of talk about growing together, and I love the blob, because as we absorb more people, the bigger we get, the more of a momentum we have, so I definitely think I'll steal that one.
Have it with my pleasure. That's another thing that I love about community, is everybody shares ideas and nobody's worried about taking credit. It doesn't matter who, like nobody's standing going, actually that was my idea. That you can't, there's none of that stuff going on. Like there is always a free exchange of information and ideas.
And there's very little ego involved, and that's one of the things. I've tried other communities in the past, but I don't know if it's maybe we could talk about this. But maybe when the Power Apps community really started to expand and have quite a diverse range of people involved, whereas when I sort of joined, it was more the CRM old Dynamics community, and it was maybe a little bit more, let's say less representative of community as a whole or society as a whole. But it's so welcoming as a community. Like one of the first things I recognized about you, Chris, is that you are the man in the room, man in this case, obviously, who will.
You didn't like it.
I really put him on. But if I'm in a room with Chris, not obviously I can hear him, because you do, because he's Chris.
And you can see his head above everyone else's.
But he is the person who is looking for people that are, a little bit on the outskirts, maybe thinking about joining the conversation, and you welcome them in and ask them about themselves and ask them, what brings you here? What do you want to, talk about? And he's such a welcoming, engaging person. I think if I could be a little bit more like that, if we could all be a little bit more Chris, nobody would be worried about joining these events. But he's back. I better stop talking about him. But it's such a welcoming community. It's there's no stupid questions. All egos left at the door. It's open to anybody, and that's really what I loved when I started to join and get involved.
There's two great points there that I'd like to expand on a little bit more. Chris is the man in the room that a lot of people will gravitate to because they know him, and also he's the person who's kind of keeping an eye out for who's on the periphery and needs to get dragged into the blob, right? So, but it is important. It's all love. It is important to have like people at each community event that other people will recognize, even if they haven't been to other community events, because I think that helps to make them at least think, oh, I know that person, I can go and speak to them. I mean, like I will always say, come and find me and speak to me, even if I don't know you. I'll be delighted to talk to you.
Alison.
Yeah, it's a struggle to pick me out in a
recognisable.
crowd usually with my council hair. So yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, but you know, if you're up to the challenge, then do find me, and I will always chat to you. But the other thing is, there's no stupid questions. That's a really good point, because at the beginning I was like, I've got something really stupid that doesn't work for me on advanced find, and I don't really want to ask these developers about it because they're going to think that I'm an idiot. Like it's, you know, like when you have to do support and you say, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again, right? And nobody ever made me feel like that was like any question I asked was a dumb question. And every time I've asked a question, at least one other person's gone, oh yeah, I've got the same problem, or they've said, I had the same thing, do this, right? Like never once have I felt really stupid for asking a question. And some of my questions have been super basic, like my one on the group chat the other day of like, why can't I import Excel Online back to Dynamics? And it was just me being an idiot. So and nobody said that. It was fine. So you know what I think, you know, how do you manage to get people, or like if you, let's start a different voyage of discovery, you know, if you perhaps, why would somebody not be involved in community, do you think? Or what would encourage people to get involved in community if they don't already? Because I'm also aware there's going to be people who have come into the Power Platform community while we've been virtual, who haven't come to in-person events, and maybe they're really super nervous of doing that. So any like tips or suggestions? Good. Well, one at a time. Go, Charles.
I think a lot of it gets back to actually Chris's amendment to my definition. If these folks are lacking passion, if they're coming in and punching a clock and they don't know what they're missing, it's really hard for them to go out and engage, right? They don't have that passion yet, and it's a job. They don't realize that to transcend it from it being a job to a tribe, or again, I don't want to overuse that word community, a family. Family is a good word here. It's hard to know what you're missing. So yeah. I would say it's that passion problem, and it's hard to get it for a technology if you're doing it for a job. If you're importing Excel spreadsheets into Dynamics 9 hours a day, it's tough to go out and say, yay, I could go out and do it for 2 more hours with people I don't know.
In an evening.
Yeah. Where I could be drinking by myself, crying about the last 8 hours I just spent.
I think that is absolutely
not
part of
to
it.
pick any, strangely specific examples, Alison, but
No, that's
weirdly specific examples, though. I think those are the winners that stick with people.
That's what when I started going to user groups, I for quite a long time before, I was looking for a user group, because I'd come from a community which is .NET and ASP.NET community, which actually was really well developed already, and had forums all over the place and lots of people to ask, and lots of you can Google an answer. When I started with Dynamics, it really was tiny compared to that. But when I started going to user groups, it was one of the first things I took from it was like, exactly like you, Alison, I am doing this on my own. I'm working on a project. I'm the only person that knows Dynamics. Nobody else is very interested. So who can I go and talk to about this stuff? And then once you start going along, back to your question of how do you encourage people along, is like you have to have a value. You have to. It's what's in it for me. So if I go to these events and I spend my evenings or a day during the week, and I take a day off work to go along to an event, and one, I need to learn stuff, and you learn stuff at user groups or in forums. And the other thing is that it has to be. I've completely lost track of what I was going to say. Back to the value statement of it has to reiterate. That's what I was going to say. It is, if you go along and you get some value from it, you learn some stuff. And I remember meeting people like Scott DeRoe, you know, and it's like, oh my God. Actually, I knew Scott from beforehand, but you know, he's just like an absolute demigod in our community. But then you go along and you think, actually, that was good for me. It was worthwhile taking the time out of my day to do that. And then you do it again, you learn a bit more, and it repeats and repeats. And that's when you start to feel like, actually, this is something for me. If it is, like you say, Chuck, you know, it's my day job and I'm just sort of clocking in, and that is the reality for a lot of people, clocking in, clocking out, then maybe these sorts of community events are not for you. But, you know, I'd really encourage you to give them a try. Get involved in forums, get involved in user groups and these other events to see what value you get from them.
I think that when you come into a value proposition, it is in the old method when it was a day out, it was an early start to get on a train to get into town for the evening event or whatever, wherever it is. It was an investment not only by yourself but by your company, and you're taking a day out of billable work if you're consultancy or support work or you know, away from your service desk if you any of those other guys. So it's making sure that you pitch it with that in mind about how much your organization is going to gain from you being there. And it's not only exposure to new ways of doing things, it's showing your company in a good light as well, because your company takes these things seriously and is willing to give back rather than taking away all the time. And I think a lot of the consultancies get that, but I think the end users probably don't into a lot of the scenarios. I think it's very, you know, as a consultancy, it tends to be, you know, easy to organize and to get the time off. But when you're an end user, I think it could do with a bit of pushing from the other members of the organization and feedback, right? So make sure that you've been once and you tell people what's happened, and you tell people that what's got on your radar about things that you're going to improve your life by.
Yeah, I think partners have become a lot more welcoming, a lot more sort of keen to get involved with community in the last few years. That wasn't always the case. We did actually used to get a lot of end user companies, and it's a user group, right? That's the whole point, is that we get people that are using the product day in, day out, whatever their involvement is, whatever questions they have or knowledge that they have to bring. Then that's why we want them there. And actually, I think going back to the point about I'm the only Dynamics person in the company, you know, that is a big draw for people to come along and just talk about something they're passionate about with other people that understand. You know, it's like AA, right? That we can go commiserate about Dynamics together.
I can tell you it's a little bit different, but you know, yeah. I don't think we do the Serenity Prayer at the beginning and end of the user group. So
We can start. I mean, you know.
Well, we could. Yeah.
It would be hopeless.
Yes, and then all go out drinking. So
yes.
Yeah.
I have a question actually, just off the back of that, because when I came to the UK, right, I didn't really know many people. Like I rocked up here with a bag. I'm not kidding you guys. Like 8 years ago, I had a bag. That was all. Okay, and I'd seen people like Scott and Joel and all of them, Ronald Lemon, yeah, that guy, right? I'd seen all those folks like sharing stuff in the communities and stuff, and I didn't even know what a community was. I mean, like South Africa had just come out of 56K modems at that point, and you guys were, you know, we were still sending carrier pigeons, man, to like deliver messages. And it was interesting because when I got here, I didn't really know anyone, and actually, Bibs, I think it was you, Scott, and Sarah that I first met. So I think it was you actually at the Birmingham User Group. Yeah.
Really?
I'm sure it was you, yeah.
Oh, no, we've not been doing it that long. So I can't have been Birmingham.
Might have been really, I don't know. It was, but I remember, like, you guys were epic, man. Like, I've made the best friends in the world from being in the community. Like, genuinely, I mean, like, I actually spend more time with my community friends than I do with my outside of community friends.
Yeah, same.
It's bonkers. And like Chuck said it perfectly, it's a family, right? You start building these relationships, and then after a while, like it becomes this thing that you just want to do because you want to hang out with people that you want to experience stuff that they've been talking about, and then it's crazy, right? Like I never thought I would be able to say I'd be sitting on a. I mean, this would be like a few years ago. I never thought I'd say I would be talking to Chuck face to face. Like that's the thing. I would like that didn't cross my mind. I would never have said a few years ago I'd be able to shake the hand of Charles Lamana. But the cool thing is that in the community,
whether
that's
we wanted it or not.
Yeah, gives you the opportunity. Yeah, that's it. Man. I think I did that to James Phillips, and he was like, "There we go."
And he was secretly looking to see if you had a basket with some lotion in it. Or something.
But honestly, like it's a great way to make friends, and actually, yeah, it's changed my existence. Honestly, if I didn't have the folks in the community, like, yeah, I wouldn't have the same lifestyle.
Do you know what? And you're not the only person to say that. I can give you at least like 3 or 4 people I can think of off the top of my head who say not only did it leapfrog their career forward, but it changed their life in terms of like how meeting friends, meeting new people, just like in so many ways. It did for me. And I think what we forget, it's very easy to forget when you've had this really warm, welcoming community around you, that actually this type of thing doesn't really exist that much outside of here. So when you speak to somebody who's never experienced it and said, oh, we're in a community, and you try not to sound like a cult, it's cult.
A what? No,
cult. But it's really difficult because like if you've never had it, it's difficult to understand. It's really difficult to understand, and so I think I've made people that I would consider I know for a fact that Chris would help me hide a body, and so would Andy and Carl. So 3 options. If I go missing, go and look either one of those 3 patios, and
I would stand next to you while you were digging the hole, at least.
Drinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Supervising. Yeah.
That's fair. So, I think it does, it makes a lot of difference for a lot of people. Summit will be one of the first people to say what a difference is made to him. Keith Watling, I know, has said many, many times that before he got involved in community, I think he was like at his 40th birthday, and it was his wife and his kids and his neighbours and his mother-in-law. And then like his next birthday, he's like out with a whole bunch of people. And,
he did pay us though, didn't he?
He did, in fairness. Well, he is ginger, so it's.
No, I think I absolutely agree. It is life-changing. It's been life-changing for me, and the sort of baby steps that I took to getting into it. Every time I was trying to, maybe not every group that I went to, but I was trying to push my own boundaries a bit more and be a little bit more like I wanted to be, rather than how I was, in terms of being able to get up in front of people or just speak to people that I didn't know. And at the end of the day, it ends up being this great thing. You're involved in this community with lots and lots of people, hundreds of people. Like you say, you could call on any time of day. I can go into numerous countries around the world and have somebody call up and say, do you want to go for a drink? Which is amazing. And I met so many like lifelong friends through it. I'm not saying everybody can have that experience or will have that experience, but until you try, you never really know, but it was, and it ends up with even the MVP thing. I don't like kind of going on about the MVP, but that is about community engagement and expertise. You need to sort of know what you're talking about. Chris, that's why you're no longer an MVP, unfortunately. But
all right, let's keep it clean.
Let me tell you something.
Fired.
You are NDA'd and I'm not. So
oh.
Actually, I want to ask a question just off the back of that. Actually, Chuck,
sure.
This is very much directed at you, my friend. Considering you've been running around, snaffling around Microsoft for some time now, and I know Bibbs, you've gone through this recently, but Chuck, you've seen like multitudes of communities come and go. like multitudes, right? And I know you have because you've been in the space for a while. What makes a community last?
Yeah, I'm gonna go
Besides
back here.
alcohol.
So, that's almost like a definition when you talk about, being there when you need to bury the body. If you go out and say, hey, would you like to catch up with a drink? And people say yes when they don't drink, this is the type of responses that you get, right? It's like, yeah, I'll bring the shovel, but I'm a vegan. Do I have to eat the body? Anyways, so it's the passion, right? Once it becomes transactional, once it becomes a business, I don't want to name any former entities, but this actually happens. Actually, we'll go back in the Wayback Machine. Inetta. Does anybody remember Inetta?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Inetta was actually the .NET community, and it started with Julie Yak's husband, David Yak, and there was just tons and tons of passion, and people were doing it for all the right reasons. And then checkbooks got brought out, and all of a sudden there was sponsorships, and it didn't last much longer than that. How many people have heard of SQL Pass?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, if you go back out and you take a look at the people that created SQL Pass, it was MVPs, it was user group leaders that did it to actually go out and make better connections and formalize those connections with their tribe. When did it kind of wander off, Chris? I think it's when checkbooks enter in, and all of a sudden you've got business people in integrated in, going out and saying, hey, are we in the black and the red? It's like, is that a thing? The conversations go entirely different. I'm not saying that those are always the death toll, but that is actually, it seems to be a tipping point that I've seen again and again.
But there's
always really interesting.
There's always a motive behind, particularly from Microsoft's point of view. There must be a cost versus reward calculation that's going on to allow people like yourself to support the communities and everything else that's going on. And that's a money business, right? You're not doing it for the love of it as much as Nigel will want you to. We are really you're trying to encourage it because it obviously helps you along the ways. It stops those questions and the support, etc., that other people give each other, and advertises the brand, so that there is money in it.
And it's hard to quantify in many cases, especially the best money. God, that sounds awkward. Or the best value of the community is I can go out and say, through to support deflection, we're worth X, right? And MVP's landed cost is Y, and I can go out and do some calculations. For folks that don't know me, my degree is in marine biology. I'm kind of a data scientist in the closet, and I can do that. But the real value is the advocacy that you guys enable. Folks, sorry, not to be gender specific, but the advocacy that you engender and you garner and you help is the difficult one, and that's where your real value actually comes into it. And I would love to actually go out and do that. And we know that word of mouth testimonial is, worth like 4x of a first party. So if we go out and say, hey, Microsoft is really good at Dynamics, it's worth something, call it a 1. If Andrew goes out and says, no, Microsoft actually really does understand this dynamic stuff and it's going in the right direction, it's worth about 4x versus when we say it. That's hard. And I think that's where some of the checkbooks wander off, is they go out and say, we know it's the right thing, but we're not measuring it. And then when the metronome and the organizations shift, they're like, hey, I can't see the value. I can't measure this. It starts becoming, hey, I can pay Google for 2 cents an impression, or Andrew can give me the same impression and he costs me 3 cents. Therefore, a search engine, I didn't mean to name one, might be a little bit cheaper than Andrew Bibby. And it's like, well, you're marginalizes Andrew Bibby's value at that point. Not to call on you again and again, but yeah.
But like, this is a classic example, right? Because I very often find when people when sponsorship gets involved or when money gets involved into it, then you get into a situation where people know the price of everything and the value of nothing, right? And it's that everybody wants to be able to measure a return on investment, and that's not how our community works.
Yeah, and it's quite surprising. I don't know, Chuck, if you have something to say on this, is that Microsoft is such a KPI-driven organization that they need to be able to measure something, and yet you've got this intangible kind of influence, if you like, of third-party people talking about your product and evangelizing for your product. Whether you can even put a money value to it, I don't know.
I think what you would have to look at then is that, and Charles mentioned it earlier, tribe. The value of a tribe is priceless, right? The value of a tribe, a band of people that believe in your product and will evangelize for your product, is priceless to any company. It's not necessarily priceless to the partner companies, but to Microsoft, that's priceless, because that tribe will always grow. Unless something really terrible happens, that tribe will always grow. And that tribe is not just our community. It's not just one community. It's an amalgamate. And in fact, that's, I would say, if I were a guessing person, that's the point behind the MVP program, is to make sure that there's always a band of brothers everywhere, all over the world, that people can go to and get involved in. Charles?
You know, I like the fact that Microsoft is very KPI driven. It takes a lot of the emotion out of it, and it lets, I think a lot of us here are ADHD and Asperger's. It helps us actually frame those conversations to a point that, again, I'm going to speak in first person, that we can actually relate to it. It's like, oh, this is the number. I get that. And I'm going to maybe take a little issue with what Allison said. You can't measure it. Maybe not holistically, but you should. This is actually, again, when we see the tipping points where a community starts wandering off a little bit, when we stop measuring their value, we go out and say, oh, it's too hard, let's not measure it, let's just invest in it, because then it's really easy to actually erode that investment. If we go out and say, hey, MVPs are worth impressions, they're worth actually NSAT and NPS, and actually that's actually a great point, is that if I go out and say, if I have more MVPs in a particular area, I would expect, as my hypothesis, I would expect that the NSAT to be higher. And then we could go out and say, how much is NSAT worth? If I were to go out and buy everybody a candy bar and I get a 0.10% NSAT, and I'm just making this up, but this isn't a real calculation we've done on Microsoft. How many candy bars?
Disappointing.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. And we do kind of some of this. How many candy bars do we need to buy in order to get an NSAT lift of 20 points? Are MVPs cheaper than that? And are they stickier? That's kind of funny. I'm using candy bars and stickiness in the same conversation. But do they have more longevity? I'm guessing that if I actually introduce a Chris Henningford or Carl Cookson or Ali Ravivi, and I go out and say, hey, these are actually some people, and you show them the way, and you show them their family, and you show them their tribe, those people are going to be a lot more connected with Microsoft and a lot happier individuals than if I'd bought them 4 boxes of candy bars.
I think it does.
Actually, we used to do that calculation with pizza and beer and user groups back in Australia, right? So Chris is nodding and clapping and whatnot, and you get happy people that night while they're at the pub and they're eating the pizza and the beer. When they go home and a week later, are they still happy? Well, if they've made a friend like Cheryl or Allison or Carl, then yeah, I think they are going to still be happy and connected. Will they still be if you just bought them pizza? Maybe not. Maybe not as much.
It is that cumulative effect that comes back to the passion. You're sort of building the passion. And if you're only going along for beer and pizza, then you're never going to kind of at some point you will drop off when it's actually not worth my time unless you're a homeless man. But yeah, it's going and seeing that added value each time you come. Yeah, beer and pizza gets them in the door. Hopefully they
and friends keep them staying there. Yeah, that's a great point. So initially, maybe you do bribe them a little bit. First hit's free, right, Chris?
Like any good dealer. Yeah.
Can I mention something that this is a bit of a word of caution for me. I think first thing is that obviously people know that I'm joking about Chris, and I can't wait for him to be back in the MVP program so we can make mayhem in Seattle again. Well, he can anyway, and I'll just follow along. And always love listening to what he's got to say. Check out a podcast he did with Mark Smith recently for some really great insight on Power Platform. As an aside, is that we, and to something Chris said earlier, actually, we're going through a transition with the user groups in the UK and actually worldwide, is that there used to be an organization that kind of helped us to organize the user groups worldwide called Dynamic Communities. They were hit very hard by the switch to virtual and COVID and everything else. And they've basically sort of stopped supporting user groups directly, at least. And so we're switching into this mode of, okay, in the UK, what can we do? And we've decided to basically form a UK Dynamics 365 and Power Platform user group. Bit of a mouthful, still working on the acronym for that one. But that means actually we need to organize ourselves, and the sponsorship we were getting from Dynamic Communities is no longer there. And we do have some support from Microsoft, still working out what that looks like. But we're in this transition of organizing ourselves as a community of user groups, if you see what I mean. So we've got like 7 or 8 user groups around the UK. And how do we pay for meetings? How do we pay to get that beer and pizza if that's what we're going to do? For meeting rooms and things like that, we need to get sponsorship. At least that's one of the options. And so it's a cautionary tale, I guess, and that's something that I'll need to think about, and that user group leaders need to think about is actually obviously the sponsorships have an, I don't want to call it an ulterior motive, but it's kind of that thing, you know, obviously they're investing money for some kind of return. And some of the people that we've had at user groups over the years will happily give us a bit of money because they love the user groups, you know, they'd love to be involved in the community. But I guess there'll be other companies that come in and expect some kind of metrics to say, okay, this is the impact of us giving you that money. So that's something to really consider for me, and that changes the dynamic of the user group really quite a lot.
It really does. And we were going to talk a little bit about the MSUG and CRMUG and how we were going to, or how the format of those is likely to change, because I think, like you just said, there is a cost attached to it. There's no cash available to run those things. And as Charles said, once companies and sponsorship get involved, it can get a bit sticky. So, you know, there's something to consider there. There's also something to consider, and I think Matt Beard was the one that said whoever manages to nail a combined virtual and in-person event format is absolutely going to revolutionize things. But you know, we're trying to move back to in-person because I think we've all identified that is the essence of the community experience, is actually being together in person. But so many people have been able to attend UGs and such that weren't able to attend them, because before COVID happened, I was trying to start little ones all over the place for those that weren't around London and couldn't get into London and stuff like that. But then COVID happened. But then now everyone can attend everything globally, and everybody's also sick of that. So you know, what's the likely format moving forward? Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely difficult. Thanks, Fred. I'll hopefully see you again at another event in the near future. But thanks for joining us. But see, another person I would never have met if I hadn't gone to a community event. I met Fred in European summits in a few different countries. Yeah, I think back to your question. So luckily, Matt Beard is involved with organising the UK user group, so he can have some ideas about how we solve the problem. But it's difficult because running hybrid events and having in person, which we would love to do, obviously, and we are planning to do, it is geographically limiting for a lot of people. And when we've had speakers come to virtual events, which have been great, we can have speakers from the States, from, you know, we've had them from Australia, from, you know, all around the world, really, which is impossible to do if you're just in London or Reading or Manchester or Bristol in the UK. That said, I miss the interaction, the personal, you know, face-to-face time of in-person events, and I think there is a certain amount of fatigue, probably quite a lot of fatigue with virtual events. So yeah, getting that right But now actually the education that we've had as part of COVID and running virtual events has really helped, and the technology changes as well, really helped us to put on hybrid events in the future, because I think we'll probably just end up running Teams meetings, with a presenter, and we've got, chat and live transcription and, anything we want there, which was quite difficult to do before. As long as we've got a couple of mics, actually, technically, we could run events where the presenter is in a different country and we've got people actually in a room together watching that presenter. So I'm hoping the barriers have been lowered actually after this 18 months. The tech has moved on sufficiently where it's actually not so hard to do, because previously we were looking at, multiple cameras and recordings and microphones and, trying to set that up over and over again in one day is a huge amount of effort for the people on the ground trying to organize that user group, which is previously why we haven't recorded live user groups, because it's been a lot of work. But yeah, hopefully that helps in the future.
And that would be a full-time job, wouldn't it? Pretty much trying to organize that.
Yeah, making sure the rooms are set up, making sure you've got the video feeds, you've got the inbound, feed from Teams, that people can hear the speaker, and vice versa, people asking questions and things like that. If we have it through Teams, I think that opens up quite a lot of opportunity. And it could be Zoom or Teams, it doesn't really matter. But the point being is that 2 years ago, that was really quite hard to do. Now, actually, things have moved on so much that the tech is kind of there where we could probably do that without it being a lot of work for each session. So we probably, if not in the next user group we do, which is in September, maybe the one after, we'll do some kind of hybrid event, just to see how it goes.
And then it opened up the discussion. I remember having this discussion with Ben Vollmer about content, because a lot of people prepare like a speech to deliver a certain number of events. But then if it's recorded and it's left online for people to access, ad infinitum, then they can only really do that maybe once or twice. So like,
that's a great point.
It's going to make
it's not just people joining and speaking. People always asking us, are you going to record the sessions like in a live event? But it was so hard to do. We kind of like, actually probably not. But in the virtual world, we have the D365 YouTube channel. We've got, I don't know, can't remember, 50 or 60 videos on there from the virtual events, and they've had thousands of views, and that's thousands of people that you've reached that you may not have done otherwise, which is incredible. And it's great for the speakers too, because there's more reach for them. So yeah, it's kind of a win-win. It's just we need to get over that sort of hurdle of actually putting one on.
Yeah. Charles? Oh, you had your hand up. Oh no, Carl, sorry. Carl.
Yeah,
sorry.
I had my hand up because Charles had his up for a while, but I have got a question for Charles actually, more to do with, Microsoft themselves have got this community now that is trying to be a place for events to happen and being a host for Microsoft communities. How do you see that evolving, and is that something that is getting invested in and will become a replacement for some of the other platforms, or is it something that's not going to evolve?
Yeah, okay, so let's start with the easiest one. Is that being invested in? We have an entire dev team actually focused on just that. So there's like 10 developers and 3 program managers who are just focused on getting that platform out for you, which actually begs the second topic, is how will it evolve? I hope to God that we continue listening to you, and that, I hear from Andrew, and he gets consensus that it would be really great if it did XYZ, and we prioritize that up near the top because it came from Andrew and our tribe of people who are using it. So that's how I think it should evolve, is us listening to you. And this is the same dev team who actually does our forums and our online community. We actually literally just went out and repurposed them and said, hey, user groups are going to be literally an integral function of our forum and our online community. And we made that change, because the pandemic actually kind of destroyed DCI's business model. right? So they, as Andrew said, they kind of said, hey, we need to focus maybe on events rather than user groups. That was a business model change. And then all the user groups said, hey, we really need this in order to actually be your advocates. We kind of need a platform for that. And we went out and we've been meeting with you, you folks who are in the advisory council from, I think November is actually when we started meeting, and actually went out, did the business requirements, went out and said, hey, what's our minimal valuable product for actually just getting a user group out there? And what's the next thing that we need to do? So there's a backlog. And I think they're actually looking to expand that group a little bit more as we actually deliver those features. So Carl, you asked like 3 questions. I think I answered 2. Did I answer all 3?
Yeah, my memory's short. So don't worry about it. It's good.
Carl already forgot what he asked as he was asking it.
So to pick up on Charles's thread there, so as the part of the UK Dynamics user groups, we used to use Dynamic Community, which is DCI, that Charles mentioned, their platform for being a place for users to register for user groups, see what the agenda was, etc. And also they had forums on there as well. And what we're switching into is Microsoft's new user group offering, which is on community.dynamics.com or community.powerapps.com. And you'll see in the top bar, there's now a link to user groups, and Carsten's put a link in the chat there. And that will get you to user groups around the world. And so we're switching into this platform now with the UK Dynamics user groups and Power Platform user groups. And also there's all kinds of other UK stuff going on there as well. But that is where you will that will be the new home. And that is the new home for the UK Dynamics user groups, where you would join and find out about events coming up across the country, register for those events. But also, very importantly, is that you're on community.dynamics.com for the Dynamics side. And so that is where the forums are as well. So previously, where you would go to DTI's forums to ask questions, answer questions, you've got the worldwide Microsoft forums available there. So we're going through that switch at the moment. I'm hoping it's going to be great. They're launching, I don't know when they're launching. They haven't said when they're actually going to launch those sites for real. They're in preview at the moment, but it'll be soon. And that's where we'll live for the next couple of years. And so, well, however long, really. But what I love is Microsoft is investing in the products and the community and the evangelism of their own products. They've got this community here, and they've responded to the need for a new home, and they're building this thing out. So, yeah, I'd like to see what's coming up. It'd be great.
Cool. So that kind of wraps us up for an hour. And who wants to give a shout out to their next community events? One at a time. Go for it.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
So I actually, I met at one of our community events a gentleman from the UK named Scott Giroux. He now has moved to Canada with SQL Cat, and it's been amazing. So Scott has been such a great user group president, our co-president, and our next meeting is actually with a person who's never presented before in a public presentation, and her name is Mira Galley, and we're actually having Jamie Willis-Rose. So Mira is going to be doing calling flows that pass parameters back and forth from chatbots and Power Virtual Agents. So most of her presentation is going to be on Power Automate, and Jamie Willis-Rose is going to be doing Dataverse for Teams. So that's the Vancouver user group. I know that I'm in Redmond, but my daughter goes to university up in Canada, back when people used to go to school, and why I offered to help run that user group. But that's going to be the one I want to shout out for, is actually the one that's actually up in Vancouver. And Scott Giroux, if you're listening to this, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure actually working with you.
I'm gonna have to tag him in the YouTube video. So,
yeah.
And
miss him.
Andrew, when's the next CRM-UG?
Yeah, Scott was like an integral part of the UK Dynamics 365 user group, and so yeah, we miss you, Scott. But I'm glad you've found a new home in Vancouver, at least until you come back and join us. So the next Dynamics 365 and Power Platform user group is 22nd of September in London Paddington currently. obviously we are in uncertain times, but that is the current plan. And we have been talking a bit about whether, okay, you know, in UK, COVID being a little bit, you know, not really sure what's happening, whether we would switch to virtual. We've decided, if Microsoft allow us to go ahead and host those host people at those offices, we are going to go ahead. It might be a little bit smaller than usual, slightly sort of, you know, closer group, but I think that'd be great, because we want to get back on the road, back seeing people. We're all jabbed up and everything else. So if you feel happy coming along, London Paddington, 22nd of September. We're just deciding on
speakers.
We're just finishing the call for speakers this week, and so we'll be announcing an agenda probably towards the end of next week. And so, yeah, expect to see lots of posts about that and to get your registration up. And you will be registering on community.dynamics.com/user group, which is where you'll find the UK user groups as well, and that event. So you register on there. But yeah, can't wait to get back in person. I actually took over the user group from Sarah in November 2019, right? Yes, 2019.
Yeah, no, 2018,
November.
wasn't it? Was it? Oh no, it was 2019.
2019, no.
And then our next event was going to be in February. Anyway, we pushed it into April last year, and then obviously we had lockdown and everything else, and we did virtual events, which would be great, but I have never actually chaired a UK user group in person before, so mildly terrified and excited for that too. And can I just say, we've always done social events the night before, so this is my little secret sauce for getting involved in community right at the end. Is the way that I got involved was because I didn't want to just rock up the next day, actually at the event, and meet a load of people and go, you know, hi, I'm Andrew, nice to meet you. I thought, why not get to know some people the night before and have a couple of drinks, because that's just the sort of person I am, a bit more social that way. So we always have a social event, pizza, beers, drink of your choice, and food of your choice. We go to a restaurant, 20 or 30 of us, and we sit down and have a chat about everything. So if you've not been before, that's a great idea to get involved. So look out for posts about that as well.
Very cool. Very cool.
Just lastly, South Coast Summit as well.
Yes.
And you've got a little quiz as well on that one, Andrew.
Oh, yes. Yes. So if I get a plug for that.
I mean, is there any point in anyone else entering the quiz? You know?
No.
Well, you know, I'm not saying it will be biased against you, but, you know, let's just see. So
what you're saying is there's no
perennial
way
winners.
we can win.
But South Coast Summit, it is a Microsoft 365 event, not just Dynamics, not just Power Platform, Power Apps. They are two of the tracks that will be at this event on the 16th of October in Southampton. The first big in-person event we have been to in probably 2 years, so beware, it may get a little messy towards the end, but that looks like a great event, and we're just deciding on tracks at the moment. Alison, Chris, Carl are involved in deciding on talks and who's going to be there talking, but if you're not signed up already, southcoastsummit.com. I say grab your ticket if you are available Saturday, because they're going to sell out, and there's going to be over 2,000 people, I would think, there. So that'll be fun. And then in the evening, after the main event itself, after we've done all the good business stuff, we have the pub quiz from 6:30 p.m, where we're going to be having quiz questions about all of Microsoft 365. So it's not going to be your standard geography, music round, you know, what else, general knowledge. You know, it will all be geared towards Microsoft stuff that we know and love, and it's always a lot of fun. It's slightly rowdy, and there will be prizes, actual real proper prizes, and we're raising money for Breast Cancer UK, which is our chosen charity because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October. So yes, grab a ticket for that. I will post a link in the chat about where you can do that, but it's like a donation to Breast Cancer UK. So all of the money we raise goes towards that charity. But yeah, should be a lot of fun. Can't wait.
Yay! So all that remains is for me to say a massive thank you to our wonderful guests, Charles Sterling and Andrew Bibby. Thank you so much. It's been awesome. I feel like we could probably have another session on this, so maybe we'll do another one either later in the year or next year. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again. Hopefully at an in-person event fairly soon, but also hopefully you'll join us for the next happy hour, which is the of September 8th, Carlos?
Yeah, something like that. We have got Andrew Buntenko, is that how you say his name? And Diane Berkelich, both doing advanced power apps and power custom PCF and all that good stuff. So
Very
it's a bit of
cool.
a shift.
So yeah, certainly more techie than this session.
Yeah.
So I'll probably hand that one over to Lee.
Yes, that's
Nice.
Lee's bag.
That's Lee's bag for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to stop recording now. Feel free to hang around for chatting and general merriment.